It's my honor today to recognize the senior senator from Johnson County and start by congratulating Senator Dvorsky on nearly 40 years of public service. 7 years on the Coralville City Council and 34 years in the Iowa General Assembly. Elected to the Iowa House in 1987 and then elected to the Senate in 1993. 1993 was the year of the first great flood. He served through multiple redistricting plans representing 5 or 6 different counties, 5 different counties, representing urban, suburban, and rural constituents. As everyone knows, Bob is not from Iowa City. He's from Coralville. He's very proud of all the accomplishments of his Coralville and has great pride in his community. When I arrived in the Senate 20 years ago, I spent a lot of time talking with Bob. I knew Bob before coming here, but really relied on him a great deal to learn the process, know the people, and sought his advice. And I've really never stopped seeking his advice over that period. In addition to his public service as an elected official, Bob had a successful career in corrections, working for the 6th Judicial District, and now as a local board member of the Community Corrections Improvement Association Board. Bob has always also been a long-time proud AFSCME member. One of the hallmarks of Senator Dvorsky's work in the legislature has always been to do good policy, always working to bring people together in a bipartisan way and work to find solutions to problems. He did this here at the Capitol and also back at home. For the last several years, he organized regular meetings of our school superintendents so we could stay abreast of issues of concern to our K-12 system. He also initiated regular meetings between our local legislative delegation and the University of Iowa administrators to stay abreast of university issues and needs. Bob, like many people, has attended hundreds, and in his case, over 40 years, hundreds and hundreds and hundreds of community meetings. He didn't miss many. Bob has a very large issue portfolio over this period of time. He worked on the establishment of the ICN. He worked on criminal justice and corrections issues where he learned there is no justice. He was also a leader in affordable housing. Senator Dvorsky worked to find an ongoing source of state funding to address the needs of affordable housing across our state with the creation of the Iowa Housing Trust Fund. Bob serves today as the president of the board of directors of the Housing Trust Fund of Johnson County. A huge body of his work includes policies enacted after the historic 2008 Iowa floods. It was one of the worst natural disasters in modern American history. Senator Dvorsky worked for several years to help communities recover. He helped secure resources for every part of the state that needed them. Certainly Cedar Rapids had a host of rebuilding projects he was involved in. Iowa City, Coralville. The University of Iowa took nearly $1 billion in damage. And at that time, we turned to the university to create the Iowa Flood Center. The first meeting when people got together to talk with the university hydrology people about how they might be able to help us, help communities be more resilient. Bob Dvorsky was at the meeting. And today, that organization has leveraged more than $120 million in other federal support to bring to Iowa. Senator Dvorsky's best work came in support of higher education. He proudly represented private colleges, community colleges, and our public universities, and of course the University of Iowa and his Iowa Hawkeyes. Bob served during the tenure of 5 University of Iowa presidents, 3 interim presidents, lots of interesting regents, including Michael Gardner, Olin Newland, Craig Lane, Bruce Rastetter, Larry McKibben, and he got along with all of them. Senator Bob was also very supportive of our other public universities, a big supporter of University of Northern Iowa and Iowa State University. During his 12 years chairing the Appropriations Committee, he worked to support projects on all our university campuses. The College of Public Health, the Hygienic Lab, the Vet Lab, the dental building, the pharmacy building, the University of Iowa Center for Biomedical Discovery, and then, of course, expansion at the Iowa Medical Classification Center. For most of his tenure in the legislature, support for education, especially higher education, has had strong bipartisan support. And I think today, Senator Dvorsky would tell you that one of his biggest concerns is about the divide we currently see in the support of institutions of higher education. Senator Dvorsky's been a great colleague to all of us. He's a good listener. He's ready to take on a fight. He stands up for the things he believes in. He has tons of institutional knowledge that we are going to miss. In this business, you size people up pretty quickly. Bob was always trusting and friendly. He always gave people the benefit of the doubt. Bob sees the good in people. In the political side of our work here, Senator Dvorsky helped our caucus for years raising money, helping recruit candidates, knocking on thousands of doors. He was always there when somebody needed help at the next election. He gave tons of his time in this endeavor. In his personal life, Bob is a dedicated father and husband. His wife, Sue, has been and is a powerful source of inspiration and emotional support. And with his daughters, Annie and Caroline, they've made a powerful support team. They were his best political advisors and supporters. Sue and Bob raised their daughters as Bob journeyed to Des Moines for the past 34 years. Why am I getting so emotional right now? No easy task. The girls grew up knowing their dad was a public servant. They got to spend a lot of time here at the Capitol, and they learned a lot about life, and they learned a lot about their dad. And as folks here know, this place can be hard on families. And the enormous sacrifice that people make to be here, the Dvorsky family stands among some of those that have given the great sacrifice to serve the public. Well, Bob will soon be starting a new life, which is outstanding. I know they plan to travel and get out and see some things that we don't get to see during the winter and spring months, and I think they're going to have an awesome time doing all that. Bob and Sue are finally going to get the time they need to do some of that. But Senator Dvorsky, thank you for being such an awesome colleague to all of us. Thank you for your friendship to everyone here. Of course, your amazing service. The people in this chamber know better than most the sacrifice that you have made and your family's made, and God bless you and thank you for your service. That's all I have to say at the moment, Mr. President. I'm sure there'll be a few other folks that want to share their thoughts.
Senators, is there further discussion on Senate Resolution 120? The chair recognizes the senator from Johnson, Senator Kinney.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise today in support of Senate Resolution 120 and Bob Dvorsky. I met Bob Dvorsky years ago. I was in high school, and Bob was just running maybe his first time for the House of Representatives. Bob came into a little store in Windham, Iowa, and that's just a burg in Johnson County, and he was in there and was getting drilled by some of my local neighbors and farmers about what he stood for. Bob sat there and very calmly answered all their questions, and it impressed me with the way he received those neighbors of mine, and I thought, hey, this guy might be all right. Later on, Bob began working for the Department of Corrections. I began working for the Sheriff's Office, so our paths would cross, and I would meet with Bob on different issues. And then later on, Bob formed and began working with all our local schools, bringing all the school boards to a monthly meeting where we would meet with legislatures and talk about different school issues. In some of those meetings, Bob and I didn't always agree. There were things that we didn't agree on, but Bob was one to listen. He would tell you what his reasoning was, and you had to respect that. Then it came to the time where I decided I was going to run for this position. He was one of the people that I looked up to, that I wanted to emulate, that he was always open and willing to talk with people. We met, Senator Bolcom and Senator Dvorsky and I met, and we sat down and we talked about trying to work for the people of Iowa and Johnson County. In that meeting, I again told them, I won't agree with you on everything, and Senator Dvorsky assured me that it was all right to be different. He at that point told me that I needed to look across the aisle, that good legislation is done on both sides of the aisle, and that you need to work together. That's one of the things that he installed in me that I needed to do. I look for him for many answers when there's questions that come up in here in the Senate, and it's going to be, he's going to be missed by me for that knowledge and the time he has spent with me teaching me the legislative process. I just want to thank Bob, thank him for his service, and again support Senate Resolution 120.
The chair recognizes the senator from Cerro Gordo, Senator Reagan.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of Senate Resolution 120. I probably have known you before many of the folks here, and I was quite surprised that it was not in this resolution. But Senator Dvorsky served as the Parks and Rec Director in Mason City, probably a bigger claim to fame than anything else on here. So people still remember him, and that had to be, 100 years ago, right? So, you did a great job there, and like I said, many people remember you, and you were a great friend then. You've continued to be. You have a great family. You have a powerhouse in Sioux, but your daughters have certainly risen to the occasion on many times in campaigns as well. It's fun to go out there and campaign with you because you enjoy it. And it's fun to see you actually being engaged. It's really a pleasure. You're going to be missed here. I've enjoyed working with you on appropriations, and it's always great to see you get excited. There are two Bob Dvorskys, you know, the mellow one, and then there's Bob when he's on fire. So you sort of have to be there at the occasion, right? And so we'll miss you here, and I will hope to see you around more and continue to see your family involved, and it's been great to call you a friend.
The chair recognizes the senator from Lynn, Senator Hogue.
Thank you, Mr. President, colleagues in the Senate. I support this resolution. Senator Dvorsky, I haven't known you as long as Senator Reagan has, but I met you first when I was a student at the University of Iowa. Go Hawks. And have known you for a long time. And then when I came back to Iowa and I decided to run for the Iowa legislature, and by some miracle, you know, you get elected and you get down here and serve. Of course, a lot of you don't know this, but for me, Senator Dvorsky is and forever will be a Lynn County legislator, right? And Bob, in his special way, made sure that people knew that he was a Lynn County legislator in that decade. I can't remember whether you were in the 90s or not, but clearly in the 2000s, you were a very instrumental part of our delegation. 2006, one thing about Senator Dvorsky, he was never shy about knocking on doors. He is a tireless campaigner, and I've knocked on a lot of doors around the state with Senator Dvorsky. But in 2006, when I was first running for the Senate, Bob decided it was time to come up and spend a day with me. And we were rapidly going through a neighborhood in northeast Cedar Rapids, but then it was time to go watch the Hawks. And so we stopped, went in, ate an early lunch, watched the Hawks. If I recall correctly, they were playing Purdue, and Iowa got a really big lead, and we decided the game was safely in hand, and then we could go out and knock on doors again. And of course, the Hawks did go on and win that game by a very large amount against Purdue, and then had a terrible rest of the season. Well, it was not good. But big win. Love the Hawks. I love loving the Hawks with Bob Dvorsky. For those of you who have not been in the Senate very long, Senator Dvorsky was the chair of the Senate Appropriations Committee for the first 10 years that I was in the Iowa Senate. And one year he adopted the theme song that you can't always get what you want. He had to make sure people remembered that. But I will tell you that as I think about the things that I have been able to help a little bit with as a state senator to get done, none of them happened without Senator Dvorsky. Whether it was the STEM initiative in 2007, which was so wildly popular, we took it statewide in 2008, and even Governor Branstad and now Governor Reynolds have embraced it. That started with Bob Dvorsky. The Anchor Center in the 6th Judicial District. Yeah, it was kind of my idea, but it was kind of because Bob Dvorsky was in a position to make that happen. Innovative, nationally innovative mental health facility for people under supervision. A great thing. We need a whole lot more of that. The Anchor Center. Victim services is an issue that I think about when I think about Bob Dvorsky. I think about his advocacy for people who have been victims of domestic abuse and sexual assault. And of course, Senator Bolcom talked about it, flood recovery. You know, for those of you who sometimes, I mean, we get caught up in it, we all do. We all get caught up in the political ideologies of the day. But when you've got 5,000 homes evacuated, 1,000 businesses, churches, other nonprofits who have been inundated, virtually every major facility of city and county government flooded, and you've got it not just in Lynn County, but you've got widespread billion-dollar damage to the University of Iowa, and then Palo and Elkader and Vinton and Cedar Falls and New Hartford and all those communities across Iowa that were affected by the flood. You realize that government's not a debating society, it's a really practical tool that we have. And there is nobody in my mind who epitomizes that more than Bob Dvorsky. He is somebody who, when something needs to get done, he has found a way over his years to get it done. And that's a great skill for people in this legislative arena to have. Finally, I have to finish with, I think, the most important thing for Senator Dvorsky, and that is really it's a family affair, right? This is Senator Dvorsky's given much of his life to public service, and his wife has given much of her life to public service, and their kids have been trained in public service. It was great to have Ann and Caroline here in the Senate with us when they were able to be here. That was great. Sue is just a dynamo as the state party chair, and that was because she was a dynamo before she was the state party chair, and she's been a dynamo since the state party chair. And I remember as a kid growing up in Iowa City what a dynamo she was in the Iowa City School District. And just a wonderful family effort, something that You know what? I really just, I mean, it's the sort of thing that I think all of us should aspire to do, is to have our families as positively involved as Senator Dvorsky has done. And with that, I support the amendment, the resolution.
The chair recognizes the senator from Polk, Senator Peterson.
Thank you, Mr. President. I rise in support of Senate Resolution 120. When I first served in the Iowa House, I had the pleasure of serving with Senator Dvorsky's former roommates, Representative Wise and Representative Cahoon, who had lots of fun stories to share about the trio when they lived together. And I remember asking about his wife, and they said, "You don't know Sue Dvorsky? She is a force." And just like Senator Hogue said, he married a dynamo, a strong woman, and I think that says a lot about your character and the strong women that you've raised. When I think of Bob, I think of his black wool coat and his gold and black striped Hawkeye scarf that he wears. You can always tell that Bob's around when you see that scarf hanging in a coat closet. I don't think people around the state know how many lives Bob has touched through his work as appropriations chair, and that's a really hard job to have. You have to learn to say no a lot, and but you have to find the things that you can say yes to. And I know I went to Senator Dvorsky with a couple of issues that were near and dear to my district's heart. And back then, you didn't get policy through unless it all had to go to the Appropriations Committee to make sure there was actually money that went along with it when Dvorsky ran appropriations. And we had a lot of checkpoints along the way to see if there might be a chance for some of my issues to make it through Bob Dvorsky. And with the thanks of Senator Reagan and Senator Shane John, we were able to get them done. Another thing I'd note about Bob is his personality, and he is a mentor for so many in our caucus. And I say, not everybody can do angry well in this chamber, but Senator Dvorsky, he's got it down. I'm sure it scared your daughters a time or two in their teenage years. But you always know where Bob stood on an issue. And Bob, we are going to miss having you in the Senate, but I'm hopeful that we will be seeing you around on the political front for years to come. Thank you to you and to Sue and your daughters for your service to this state. You're going to be missed.
The chair recognizes the senator from Polk, Senator Bolton.
Thank you, Mr. President. I too rise in support of the Dvorsky resolution. I stand before you a proud Dvorsky intern. When I was a law student at Drake University, I worked with Senator Dvorsky and have considered him a mentor ever since. It really is impressive to think back on all the things that Senator Dvorsky has done throughout his career here. I appreciate the remarks that have been said about Senator Dvorsky's family. His whole family has been involved in bettering our state with political involvement. His wife, Sue, of course, serving as Democratic Party chair. His daughter, Ann, helping with my state Senate campaign, also has meant a lot to me. He truly has been a mentor to many of us, and myself absolutely included, from 2004 to present. Bob Dvorsky is somebody who cares about this institution. He wants to see the Senate succeed. And you've heard that in his remarks and in his insistence that we have professionalism and decorum in this body. And he has made that a hallmark of his tenure to do things the right way for the right reasons. And I think that's been reflected in his work. It's been an honor to serve with Senator Dvorsky, and I know he will be missed in this body, but I think we all can appreciate that this body is a better place because of the service of Senator Dvorsky, and he should be congratulated on a well-earned retirement. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the senator from Jackson, Senator Bowman.
Thank you, Mr. President. I also rise to support Senate Resolution 120 honoring Senator Dvorsky. Incredibly dedicated man to public service. I appreciate everything you've done for the state of Iowa, Senator Dvorsky. Some of the things I really appreciate, or I'd say I'm fond of, is your institutional knowledge. There's not anybody that's in this chamber that I know of that has more stories to tell you about any particular issue possible. And it always starts, you remember this, don't you? I'm like, no, it's well before my time. But then he goes on to tell you the story, and you learn a lot about this place and how things work and the operation. So I'm going to miss your stories, Bob, and I'm hoping I'll be around you occasionally to get new ones. I also got to serve 8 years with Bob on the Education Committee, and I think we're both very dedicated to education policy, and I consider him a strong ally. Anytime we had some questions about what was happening in the Education Committee, we always would roll through the situation until we felt good about what was going to advance. And so I've really enjoyed spending time with you on that committee. It was mentioned was the appropriations chair in my freshman year. You learn a lot about the power of that individual, because I can remember getting my heels dug in on an issue or two, and maybe going to Senator Hogue, hey, what can I do? He goes, well, put it on standings. And okay, and I go to Senator Dvorsky, and he gently let me down. He wouldn't do it in a slap of the face manner, but he'd let me play along like there was a little bit of hope, and then eventually it would be, no, we can't get that on, Senator Bowman. That doesn't fit. So I appreciate how difficult of a role that was. I mean, it's a difficult position to have. And so I thank you for your years of service on that. I guess, lastly, I've really enjoyed our social time. We've gone out for many dinners and events trying to critique the debate or the issues that we just debated. And, Bob, I consider you a friend, and I've really enjoyed those times together. And thank you for your leadership. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the senator from Lynn, Senator Mathis.
Thank you, President. I'm standing in support of Senate Resolution 120, honoring Senator Dvorsky for his years of service. Senator Dvorsky, I will probably say something that's just a little bit different than what the others said about you today. You are certainly deserving of all the honors and the accolades that you've been given, and you have been a champion for democracy and for the power of listening to the people. But what I want to say about you today has to do with what a great father and a great husband you are. I'm getting choked up, Senator Bolcom. While our daughter was growing up, I told my husband that his involvement as a father, giving her encouragement and support, would be all important in how she saw herself, the world, and as she made good choices about healthy relationships and her future. Well, that is how you have raised your daughters, Senator Dvorsky. We have all met Annie and Caroline in different years of their lives, right? And your daughters have benefited from your unending support. That's a huge part of how they have become strong women. They will do great things because you believed in them and you respected them. You also respected your spouse. We know that Sue is a force of nature, dervish, right? And it takes a strong and supportive spouse to encourage and sometimes step back from the limelight. And you did that many times for Sue. But you both have worked in tandem. You've both worked in tandem so that you could, do things individually, but combine that to make a difference exponentially. And that was huge. So, Senator, thank you for all that you have first done for women, for us as senators, for your constituents, and for our state's democracy. Thanks, Bob.
The chair recognizes the senator from Lynn, Senator Horn.
Thank you, Madam President. I'm up to supporting SR 120. I go back and I try to figure out, he has 34 years, I have 46, that's 80 years actually we've had together. And we've been to so many meetings, I feel like he's a brother, you know. He come to Cedar Rapids for everything, and he gave positive support. And always had the institutional knowledge of what was going on there, at home, and at the legislature. And as a friend, and with the way he ran the budget, you could go talk to him, and you were pretty sure, well, you knew he was listening, but you didn't know when you walked away whether you got anything or not. But you tried, you know. And it's a difficult position to be in. But back home, we had meetings together. We were on the same committees and met several times. And then, of course, when Sue came into his life, I go way back, you know, came into his life, and it was exciting to see the two get together and develop into two superpowers. But I think, Bob, I don't know how I'm going to go now after 34 years together, that we're going to separate. I always say sometimes that when you leave here and you see people, they don't die, but they die in your life. You really don't get to see them again. And I'm asking that, I hope, Bob, that we can get together and have a cup of coffee or something else and make it quite, we'll say at least annually. And so I want to wish you the best, and Sue and your daughters. Beautiful pair of daughters there that you had. So thank you very much. I appreciate it.
The chair recognizes the senator from Polk, Senator McCoy.
Thank you, Madam President. Ladies and gentlemen of the Senate, I rise in support of Resolution SR 120, and I wish Bob much happiness and good health, and I've enjoyed our time together. I think back about the work we did. Bob was a type of appropriations chair that could spend all of the state's money, and when he got done with that, then he started working on my money, or the money in my appropriations budget. And Bob always had the people's best interest at heart. And I think back about flood recovery and what we were all going through with that whole mess. And Senator Hogue reminded us that it was really a devastating time, and we had chaos everywhere we looked, and we just did not know what kind of support we were going to get from the federal government, and we didn't know what the state government was going to need to put in. But we just knew we had to do something, and so working together with you, I think through the iJobs program and flood recovery, we rebuilt much of the University of Iowa's campus. We worked around the Coralville area and then concentrated on all of the people that were without homes in Cedar Rapids. And it was an amazing time. It's the time that I think I was busier than I've ever been in my legislative history. And as chair of the infrastructure committee at the time, I just remember knowing just what we were up against in terms of just total multi-billion-dollar losses around the state of Iowa. And I think we did a wonderful job given what we were faced with getting through that situation. And you were a true leader during those times, and you were steady, making sure that everybody was taken care of and everybody was treated fairly. And you've always been a fair and open appropriations chair. When we were in the majority, we could just bring any idea to you, and we knew we were going to get a fair hearing, and if you found a way, you were going to make it happen. There's one thing that you've done that I think is part of your legacy, and that's the Housing Trust Fund. And what that has done over the entire state, leveraging affordable housing projects in communities statewide. You've impacted every single county in the state with that program, and I'm just so pleased that you had the vision to do that, and that we had the sense to build it into the state budget as a standing appropriation. So, Bob, I'm gonna miss you, but I know I'm gonna see a lot of you around Democratic functions in the future, and you and Sue spend some time together and enjoy life. Kick back a little bit. You've earned it, and we'll see you along the road. Thanks.
The chair recognizes the senator from Potawatomi, Senator Dawson.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in support of this resolution. And I just want to thank Senator Dvorsky for his time, particularly on the Senate Justice of Appropriations Committee. You were definitely an informal leader there these last couple of years. I've really enjoyed this last year in particular, having the opportunity to actually sit next to you. One of the things I've always admired about you is your, I think we've heard here earlier on from Senator Bolcom and Senator Bowman, Senator Horn, about your institutional knowledge. And I can recall a couple subcommittees where we had some presenters come in. I think you and I probably talked more than we're actually paying attention to the presenter. Nothing against the presenters or anything, but you always knew the backstory of what they were trying to talk about, and you'd even mentor me further and try to get to the point of what they really wanted to say, what they weren't saying. And I always loved your ability to actually go through all their charts and highlight stuff out and make notes right away. You always got caught right down to it as to what the real point of they need to get across in their sub-appropriations. And I think that was a healthy lesson for myself, just as to reinforce our role of government as oversight in some aspect. So I want to thank you for that lesson and what you kind of informally mentored me in the last couple of years. And I'm sure amongst many of our other colleagues as well, but I've always admired that about you. As well, too, as I mentioned yesterday with Senator Horn, some of the conversations in the back lounge, I was waiting today to talk about you as well. You would definitely be the other wing person back there. And I will appreciate, despite how rancorous things might have gotten on the floor last year, once we walked past that door, we had some good conversations. The back lounge is always about family, friendships, and just what's going on with life and everything. So I appreciate you breaking down that barrier, and I wish you the best in your retirement. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the senator from Story, Senator Cornbuck.
Well, thank you, Madam President. I certainly am going to support Senate Resolution 120. Senator Dvorsky, you and I have worked together and had conversations on an incredible array of issues over the years that I've been here, which only amount to about half of the years that you've been here. But in the time that we have worked together, I've always appreciated your friendship and your support. Not always your agreement, but that's fine. We've had some good discussions there and sharing of contrasting views. I want to particularly address your work as Appropriations Chair and to thank you for all of the good work that you have done on support of education and especially higher education. I've always thought I detected a little bit of a bias there in favor of the University of Iowa, but I have to say that Iowa State and UNI and the community colleges have always received your strong support, and I thank you on behalf of the students. I thank you for that. In particular, the accomplishment that stands out in my mind is within the last few years, we had 2 years of tuition freezes and would have had a third-year tuition freeze, except that Governor Branstad vetoed the money. 3 years of tuition freeze meant that there would have been a whole class that would have gone through 4 years of college education with the same tuition level. That would have been remarkable. But 3 years was quite an accomplishment. I want to thank you on behalf of the students for that, and that is a goal to which we should aspire once again. The other thing I wanted to mention is a subject on which there's not often a lot of impassioned discussion, but is really quite a remarkable accomplishment. Back in 2010, as we were struggling through those very, very difficult budget times, the Bush recession, the Great Recession, the greatest economic downturn this country has experienced since the Great Depression, we had to make some very, very, very difficult budget decisions. And Governor Culver and the Democratic leadership in the House and the leadership here came together to deal with that very unpleasant task. But we handled it extremely well. And I'm not just patting ourselves on the back. I want to particularly concentrate and focus on the reaction of the credit rating agencies. At that time of severe economic hardship, our credit rating was moved up to AAA across the board. And you don't get any better than that. Now, you don't get a lot of impassioned outpouring of oratory on that subject, but really protecting the credit rating and the financial stability of this state is the foundation of everything else that we do, and you played a critical role in achieving that success, and thank goodness we have managed to maintain that credit rating ever since. So thank you for that. Thank you for your support for education. Thank you for so many things. Thank you especially for your years of friendship. I've always appreciated that.
The chair recognizes the senator from Black Hawk, Senator Danielson.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise to honor an Iowa humble servant in Bob Dvorsky. I consider him a throwback leader. And I think the secret to Bob Dvorsky's leadership here in the Senate is he tried to make everybody successful without claiming any of that success for himself. I'm Bob Dvorsky's example of that, and I'll share a couple of those experiences. The UNI STEM initiative has been mentioned a couple of times. At the time, it seems like ancient history now, but at the time, it was the first statewide project for the three Regents universities, and there have been many. We ask our Regents universities to lead from time to time, both academics but also economic development, bringing the two together. At the time, the University of Northern Iowa had not gotten the statewide leadership project of the year, if you will, for over 10 years. Iowa State, Iowa, because of their great footprint in Iowa, had gotten a lot of credit to lead statewide programs. Thank you, Bob Dvorsky, for seeing the wisdom that our STEM initiative should come from an educational perspective first. And that's the secret sauce of the University of Northern Iowa, right? That's our brand, how to help teach others, teach other things better. And Iowa State, still to this day, would love to have the STEM program headquartered at Iowa State. But the UNI STEM initiative has always been home base for the University of Northern Iowa. And you saw the wisdom in that. I get a lot of credit for that, by the way. Back home, don't deserve any of it. Bob Dvorsky said that's where it should go, and he was right. You've also been there in my defeats. And you're probably the only senator who's seen me cry. I think twice, if I remember right. I am the all-time Senate leader in the majority for being a floor manager that loses bills on the floor. Maybe someday when I leave, they'll talk about that. But I've always believed that everything we do doesn't have to be scripted, that we should push the curve a little bit. And vote counts are important, but probably talking about things and working through them even more important than that. And why not in a place where we can all kind of learn together? So Bob, for some reason, was always there after those defeats. And his leadership is about helping other people succeed, but it's also about helping you through those other moments. And we've shared a few of those moments, and I want to thank you for that fatherly leadership, if you will, from a guy who hasn't had a lot of positive male role models in my life. You've certainly been one of them. And then I thank goodness that everybody talked about the time frame between 2008 and 2011. He will never get enough credit for those years. But I'm going to kind of put a encapsulation on it. In the spring of 2008, I had a chance to go to China with Governor Culver. Interesting backstory about that we'll share someday. We literally step off the plane in Des Moines, and it was the tornadoes in Parkersburg had just occurred while we were in flight. So the governor gets told, we got to go to Parkersburg. Away he went, and little did I know from that moment of the tornadoes in the spring to the floods later that year of 2008 that Bob Dvorsky, Teresa Kehoe, and Jeff Danielson would be a trifecta who literally spent more time together in the Capitol over those next 3 years trying to figure out what the heck to do. Think about it. In 2008, 2009, Iowa was literally gut punched. The worst natural disasters in our state's history, over $10 billion in damage. It was at the time the 5th largest natural disaster in American history in a little old state called Iowa with 3 million people. So there's one gut punch. Shortly thereafter, our economy was gut punched again with one of the worst man-made disasters, the Great Recession, only eclipsed by the Great Depression. And what is Iowa going to do? Well, we set about to come up with a bunch of different ideas to try to reinvest in our communities and rebuild them. So this senator got to be a part of the Rebuild Iowa office, the sales tax flood recovery bill, the performance of duty fund, which today is a stabilizing fund for the governor when we're not here to make sure we can still respond to those things. And it wasn't just Democrats from 08 to 10. People forget that the sales tax flood recovery idea was actually passed after the Tea Party rise of 2010. Senator Schultz, I remember being in meetings with you over in the House. Somehow I got tapped to show up early in the morning and figure out with this second Governor Branstad administration and a House who had to keep its promises, by the way, about fiscal responsibility wrapped around the idea of the Tea Party. Sometimes it's helpful for us to understand whether the ingredients of success are actually possible given what we do on the campaign trail. We should think more deeply about that when we're dealing with each other here in the Capitol. I learned in that moment that Iowa needed to respond in some way. We didn't have a lot of state money to do it. We had a politics at the time that questioned whether we should even do it. And I spent a lot of early mornings over in the House because Bob Dvorsky believed in me. And I'll never forget Don Avenson walking up to me after I knew I got assigned to this, what today you might call a hot mess of a committee. And he said, Jeff, this could be a signature piece of legislation in the history of Iowa, a long-term way to fund flood recovery that doesn't require all of us to come into our committees every year and just react to it. And it was, I think, a fiscally conservative idea. Those communities that had the need, that had shown some growth, before we got some of that sales tax money at the state level, let it stay at the local community and let them rebuild. And we worked through it. And today, I think it's close to $300 million in Cedar Rapids alone. that they've used for their match and their rebuilding efforts. You will never get enough credit, Bob, for that 3-year stretch, but you should. It showed all of the wonderful things, all the knowledge, skills, and abilities you had developed up to that point. It actually gave me an opportunity to be a part of stuff that I had no idea why I was even being involved in it. And the Rebuild Iowa office, I'll just end with this, was a perfect example of Bob Dvorsky's belief that government should still work and work well. And if you can do it with a bipartisan approach, you should. When we started that office, people thought that was going to be another bureaucracy to be around for another 40 years. We were insistent that we would do the work with General Dardis, staff it up, provide the help to the communities that we need, and then end it. I think that's a lesson for a lot of us when we get bogged down with the ideology of why we think about things and don't give ourselves permission to break out of it. That was a 3-year office that helped do a lot of wonderful things, and we staffed it back down. And then Bob probably spent the money somewhere else as the appropriations chair. I can't thank you enough, Bob, for giving me a chance to be who I really wanted to be here in the Senate, which was a problem solver, somebody who could work on ideas, some that might have a little bit of political challenge to them, some that might have a policy or a financial challenge to them. But you let me literally be a kid in a candy store and do good policy and good politics at the same time, and I will forever be thankful for that. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the senator from Osceola, Senator D. Johnson.
Thank you, Mr. President, Madam Chair, I don't know, Madam President. Sorry about that. I was just thinking about Bob. Senator Dvorsky, I rise in support of Senate Resolution 120. Now, I've heard a lot about floods, and I can't really address that issue because everybody knows, I hope, that Osceola County has the highest point in Iowa, so all the rain that falls there goes downhill. So I can't really, I'm sorry about that over the years. But I can talk about family. There's been a lot of references to family here, Bob. And, even after being here 20 years, it surprises me that people that have been here even longer don't realize I have a brother that circulates around the rotunda out there. But we are brothers. And we're cousins. I don't know a lot of people know that, but we are not first cousins. I don't know what it is, second, third, whatever. But you represent the Bohemian side of the family, my mother's side of the family. All those Czechs that are around the Cedar Rapids area, Iowa City area, the Tipton area, Cedar Bluff. And they were all Democrats. The ones in Cedar County. My grandpa Amos was the chair of the Cedar County supervisors for a long time, a real leader there in local Democratic politics. And my father's side of the family, if you knew my father and his politics, that was a Republican side of the family. But we got along. We got along very well. Together. It's a lesson for all of us. Now, we don't always agree. I hate kolaches. I just hate them. I don't know why. I hate them, Bob. But Bob loves them, and that's great. But we do agree on a couple of things. One is, and I want to make sure that this is mentioned, there's been a lot of references to your support of women. And I remember working with you on appropriations to try to restore funding to programs that prevent domestic violence and provide shelters for abused women and men, for that matter. So that we do agree on, and I think it's one of those things that we're still overlooking and not serving the best that we can. The other thing that we agree on, I think, is that you represent two of the finest people that walk this earth. Mike Quinlan and West Branch High School football coach Butch Peterson, who just recently was named National Football Coach of the Year at the high school level. And I know we agree that they are two fine people. You're in that class too. You've got a lot of class. Butch would say that. He'd say, you got a lot of class, Bob, and you do. But I want you to send a message home. This is just between Bob and me. It's an inside joke, but tell Sue the answer is still no. Thank you for your service, Bob, and I would urge everyone to support Senate Resolution 120. Thank you, Madam President.
The chair recognizes the senator from Dubuque, Senator Yoakum.
Thank you, Madam President. And I, too, rise in support of honoring Senator Dvorsky this morning. Bob, I'm not sure I'm going to find the right words to accurately portray my admiration and my gratitude to you. I've always kind of considered you a big brother. And one thing that I've always admired is that you have never viewed power as something to feather your own bed or for your own ego, but rather you never lost sight that the reason we have the power that we have from our constituents is for the common good. And that you have always had the courage of your convictions. So, Bob, as a term of endearment, when Bob was the appropriations chair, I used to refer to him as Senator Moneybags. He always seemed to find a way to find a solution to problems when we had them. And as has been mentioned, he's also been able to tell us no on occasion. But Bob, I just greatly admire your leadership through some very difficult times in your tenure here. You have certainly left your mark on the state of Iowa, but what I probably admire more than anything is you as a man, and your loyalty and your encouragement and your support for your wife and your daughters and to many of us in this chamber. So thank you so much. It's been an honor to serve with you. I'm going to miss you a lot. And I wish you, Sue, and your daughters all the best. Thank you, Madam President.
The chair recognizes the senator from Polk, Senator Bisignano.
Thank you, Madam President. I think, Bob, I'm probably the only one in the chamber that came in your class. We started in '87, and you and Weiss and Cajon were the three amigos, and we were much, much younger then. We were very active, and we had some great, great times. And one of the things I think that you and I, where we got our true background of fighting for women's rights, was we probably had the best mentor in the world with Minette Doder. And you either understood women's rights or you would not exist in the world of Minette Doder's. And to this day, I think she's probably one of the greatest women that I'll ever have the opportunity to serve with, and I think you'll agree. So, you know, we came together, and then I came to the Senate, and then 2 years later, you came to the Senate. And then I left, and I come back, and you're still here. It's like, wow, Bob Dvorsky, I thought he was 90 years old. But you were here, and I was happy you were here, because it was like coming back into a place I knew I had a friend. And you and I have always gotten along. And, you know, all the firsts that we had together of getting elected. And actually, I was at your wedding and met Sue prior to you getting married. It was a beautiful wedding. Changed your life. Broke up the amigos. It's never been the same. But the one thing that I've always admired about you was, you know, people have different ways to express humor. And you are really a funny guy. You have a way to make me laugh anyway, and I appreciated that. Yeah, I don't know how to describe it. Those of you who think Bob's funny, you know what I'm talking about. And those who don't, well, you're missing a pretty funny guy over there. And so your friends come and your friends go, and just Wally's leaving. And all the time I've known you, it's been a very, very good relationship. And I wish you and I wish your wife and your daughters well. You're moving me up the ladder of getting close to the oldest guy in the room. I could always plan on being younger than you. And so you're leaving, Wally's leaving. I mean, I'm moving up rapidly here. And so anyway, Bob, thanks for your friendship and thanks for all the good times and all the good things everybody has said about you. I don't have to repeat those. I just wanted to make more of just a personal message to you. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the senator from Polk, Senator Zahn.
Thank you, Madam President. I stand in support of Senate Resolution 120, and I congratulate Senator Dvorsky. I have always admired the way you handle yourself on this floor. I know that yesterday it was talked about that the Senate is a club, and you've been a true dignitary for the Senate. I remember when I first came in here, the class with Senator Danielson, and we were tied 25-25. And I thought that was pretty cool, because that means we all had to work together. And for some of you that weren't down here, we really did have to work together. We had a president that switched, if I recall, every other week. And Senator Dvorsky, you were the appropriations co-chair at the time. And I always admired the way you handled yourself, and you're a good example to all of us. And I've been very appreciative of that. I know that in 2010 I ran for Congress, and at the time your wife Sue was the chair of the Democratic Party, and I didn't know really what to think of that. But after that campaign was over, I came to get to know her better. So I also want to thank her for her sacrifice. She treated me fairly when I was a candidate. There was times that a little upset, but you move on from those kind of things. Always admired, there was one issue that you and I always had in common. We didn't really have a lot of, I'll be careful about what I say, admiration for the person that ran the Department of Education. And I remember I had a bill that Senator Quirmbach allowed a subcommittee on. That was to shut down the Department of Education, which I was just in shock. Well, we had that subcommittee, and we had a lot of common ground that we had in regards to our concerns about some of the things at the Department of Education, in particular the leadership. And then, of course, we had a subcommittee here this year. And I admired that where you were on that, because you're very passionate about education. I think what we all want is we want what's best for our home school districts. But you're going to be missed down here. You're a legend in this chamber as well. And I wish you and Sue the best of luck. And I can tell you he loves those daughters. Because one time I was up at a UNI football game, and we crossed paths, and you were just gleaming with pride with your daughter who was in the band. And I remember when your daughter worked down here at the Capitol, and same thing happened. So you've always had your priorities straight, and that was your family came first, and the pride that you have for your family. And I wish there was more people that we serve with, as well as the example that you've set for all of us. So for that, I thank you, and I wish you the best of luck, and hopefully we'll all stay in touch with you. Thank you, Madam President.
The chair recognizes the senator from Blackhawk, Senator Dotzler.
Thank you, Madam President. I rise in support of Senate Resolution 120 and supporting my good friend, Senator Bob Dvorsky. I've known Bob for some time. I've been in the legislature, it's my 22nd session, and my years with him has been something that I've learned a lot from Bob. We seem to always sit close to each other in our caucus at the opposite end of the table. And I don't know, maybe we've got in trouble a few times for our side conversations. But one thing I learned about Bob is he's always had respect for the Iowa Senate and how you conduct yourself in this place. And he's been known to get up and call points of order a few times, especially when it's been needed. And maybe sometimes we should call him more than we do. But it's been something that I've learned from. And when he's gone, I might have to take up the new leadership role when it comes to that. One of the things that I have to say about Bob Dvorsky is that, when you listen to all the things that he's done and worked on, and you hear people get up and speak, it's hard to come up with new stuff. But one of the things that I remember about him was just prior to the floods of 2008 that Senator Danielson talked about, as chair of the Appropriations Committee, he got kind of hit from a lot of different directions about the needs of our state, and having to sort that out is never easy. And I was chairman of the Economic Development Appropriations Committee, and he came to me and said, Cedar Rapids has got some real issues. And I know that they were up the Capitol talking about some of the problems that they had with workforce and not being able to find the skilled and qualified workers they need. Guess what? 10 years ago, Rockwell Collins was saying, we're paying top wages, top benefits of anybody in the aerospace industry in the country, but we're having difficulty recruiting people here to Iowa, and especially to Cedar Rapids. And we need to reinvent ourselves, and we need some help. And so Bob came to me and said, we need to come up with some ideas. And from that, we worked with Cedar Rapids to come up with trying to reinvent their riverfront, make it more attractive with amenities, and came up with the River Enhancement and Community Attraction Tourism Program. And at that time, before the flood hit, we convinced the Iowa House. They went along with it with good support with Republicans in the Iowa House, especially the Cedar Rapids delegation, and Governor Culver. So we had a big unveiling in Cedar Rapids, and we at the in the Czech Village at the new museum. And I mean, we couldn't have been more proud of getting $10 million a year for 4 years, not just for Cedar Rapids, but all our communities in Iowa to enhance themselves, to make it more attractive to Iowa. And then the 2008 flood hit, and we had to reallocate that $10 million to help communities. And Bob led that up, that charge. I also found out that he has a heart, and he's kind of a soft guy, although he does have a temper. And especially if you attack someone he cares about or loves, and then you can see that coming out. And Bob can turn as red as a rose when he's ready to blow, and you can see it coming. But I also found out about a soft heart, and so I implemented a strategy with him and the staffer, Teresa Kehoe, on economic development appropriation budget. If I went in there and whined and actually cried, I did a lot better with my targets. So they were on to me after that, and I actually did work up a real tear and Senator Danielson. I don't think there are any more people anywhere in the legislature that haven't seen me cry more than they've seen you. I mean, I'm at the top of the list. But I want to tell you, I've got a story I probably shouldn't tell, but I'm going to do it. And actually, it's a good story about Bob and his heart, and it reflects more negatively on me. So it was Valentine's Day some years ago, and you know how we get tied up and stuff, and you get busy, and I realized I hadn't bought a Valentine's card for a certain someone, and I'm going to protect the innocent here. And so I called her up and said, you know, it's Valentine's Day. I tried. There was a flower shop down, I knew it was down the street here, and by the time I got there, they were closed, but then I realized they'd been closed for months, so that didn't work out real well. And right across the street was a Quick Trip, and you'd think gas stations would have cards on them racks. It didn't have that. So I said, I tell you what, you know, we're going to go to dinner tonight. Why don't you buy yourself a card, and I will sign it. Bob was unknowns to any of this. And he said, what are you doing? I said, well, we're going to Tamia's, you know. And I said, well, do you want to come with dinner? Yeah, I'd like to do that. Well, I didn't really view it as a Valentine's Day dinner, but so Bob's sitting there and innocently, and my friend, she hands me this card, and I read it. And it was the mushiest card I ever saw. And I don't deal well with those kind of things, and I swallowed it, I, you know, shakingly signed it, dressed it, licked the envelope, and handed it to her. She opened it up, read it, and then took a swing at me and said, you bleep, bleep, and cracked me on the shoulder, and Bob's eyes were this big. And he's going like, what did you get me into, you know? Well, so we had a good dinner, and I thought I got by with that, but a year later, Bob comes over to me and hands me a Valentine's Day card to give and said, I don't want to ever see you get into that situation again. What kind of guy does that for another friend? That's who Bob Dvorsky is. He cares about people down to his soul. And I don't think you could have a better quality than that, to actually care about people and go out of your way to make things better for them, even when maybe his friend's a little thick-headed and doesn't understand what Bob understands and what things mean. And I don't think that I could say any more than that to honor Senator Bob Dvorsky, that he's really a good guy, a great family person. Him and his wife will care for each other dearly and their family. And we're going to miss you, Bob, in this chamber. You're a great guy and a great friend. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the senator from Benton, Senator Kaputsian.
Thank you, Madam President. You know, when I get up, I watch Senator Bokum when he gets up, and he's always buttoning his coat. And it's getting towards the end of session. It's kind of hard for me to keep up with you there, but I envy you on that. Well, I rise today in support of Senate Resolution 120. And my memories and comments about Senator Dvorsky are, while we're on opposite sides of the aisle, and we've had discussions where we don't have the same opinion, and sometimes they can get heated, but my memory of Bob Dvorsky will always be that before we part, we always have a smile on our face. We talk about something lighthearted. We never burn that bridge. And that has been mainly because of his effort. And so I really appreciate that about Senator Dvorsky. And another thing that Senator Horn talked about yesterday that I think a lot of people, maybe not so much in this chamber, but across the state of Iowa, don't realize how many people here that have sacrificed some of their home life, the things that they've missed. Senator Horn, that really brought a point to mind to me that How many people here have made that commitment? You know, a lot of times people back home get upset because of how we voted on something, or why don't you feel this way or that way, and they think we're down here having a ball, having fun. Well, it's hard being down here, especially when, like Senator Dvorsky spent a lot of years while his family was growing up, away from home. And I'd just like to point that out, not only for Senator Dvorsky, but for all of those, especially the younger legislators that are trying to raise a family, especially the mothers that, you know, would like to be home with their younger family. And so I appreciate all that, especially Bob. And so I guess I don't have a lot more to say except that someday I hope that Bob and I could maybe get together and go fishing on Lake McBride. And so all I'd like to say is to my Czech friends, jak se máš, which means thank you.
The chair recognizes the senator from Mahaska, Senator Rosenblum.
Thank you, Madam Chairman. Senator Bob, you know, do you speak or don't you speak? I wasn't going to speak until Senator Bisignano prompted me to do so. I spent the first 4 years up here. You were the appropriations chair. That was your job, and my job was to vote no, right? But 2 years ago, I changed seats. You know, I sat where Senator Kreinbrink did for a couple of years, and then where Senator Green is for a couple of years. And last year I chose to come over here. And I miss my old neighborhood. Maybe the others don't experience that, but you're in a neighborhood, right, where you sit, you talk to those people more, maybe about different things. I do miss my old neighborhood, but I've really enjoyed sitting in front of you. And here's where Senator Bisignano's comment comes into play. The last 2 years, during debate or points of personal privilege, I've heard just about every one of your comments that you uttered under your breath. And let me tell you, there was the good, the bad, and the ugly. So, but I got to know you a lot better than the last 2 years, and I have really value that, and I mean that. I consider you a friend. You've been the ranking member on the committee that I chair, so we've worked together on some things. But those little comments, and they were so, that's who you are, and they were so welcome, and I found them amusing. I never found them maddening, by the way. Quite often I found myself agreeing with you, regardless of who you were responding to. So thank you for your service to the state of Iowa, for being a great family man, and I just I value very much getting to know you better, Senator. Thank you.
The chair recognizes the senator from Johnson, Senator Bolcom, for final remarks on Senate Resolution 120.
Well, thank you, Mr. President. Mr. President, ladies and gentlemen of the Senate. Let me get my jacket button. Senator Capuchian. I'm going to take the phone out, though. Well, it's hard to say goodbye. And it occurs to me as we talk about Senator Dvorsky, our guard's down today, right? There's no partisan stuff going on. Our clubs are laid down, and it's pretty clear that you're surrounded by people that respect and love you. And that's a pretty good feeling. But there were a couple things that we forgot. And Senator Capuchian, thanks for bringing up the Lake McBride issue. I'm surprised it didn't come up earlier. And if you build your own homemade raft, Senator Dvorsky would be happy to fish with you on Lake McBride. Bob also had a clerk, John Larson, that served with him a number of sessions, and John passed away on the job here, and that was a hard thing for Bob and his family. But there are a couple other things that over this side of the aisle are well-known Dvorsky things. And Bob had the flu one session, and he about killed us. There were several of us that got the flu, and it went on several years. I don't remember what year that was, Senator Reagan, but we nearly died from Dvorsky flu. And then I had an experience where one night we were at a reception, Bob needed a ride home, and I took him home, and somehow the door got locked on his side of the car, and he broke the doorknob off of my car trying to get out of the car. Do you remember that, Bob? And Bob had a long service as appropriations chair, as folks have noted, and did a great job at that. During that tenure, I also served as the chair of the Ways and Means Committee. And it's like, what could go wrong with two far-left Johnson County liberals in control of those two, or chairing those two committees? Well, the answer is not much. You did a lot better job spending than I did raising revenue. 34 years of service, traditions, friendships, progressive policies, family, and leadership. And your belief, core belief, that government can be a positive force when it's done well, run well, a positive force in people's lives has really been guided your work for all this time. Senator Bob, always the senior senator from Johnson County, thank you for your service, sacrifice, and dear friendship to all of us. Congratulations on a job well done. All the best to you and Sue and Annie and Caroline as you venture out into your new life. Mr. President, I would move Senate Resolution 120.
The senator from Johnson moves the adoption of Senate Resolution 120. Those in favor say aye. Aye. Those opposed say no. The resolution is adopted. The chair recognizes the senator from Johnson, Senator Dvorsky.
Thank you, Mr. President. I appreciate Senator Capuchin talking about fishing on Lake McBride, so I didn't have to cry, then I could move forward and give the speech, so thank you. First of all, need to thank a lot of people on this great long journey in the Iowa House and the Iowa Senate. First of all, and everybody's talked about this, Team Dvorsky. Ann and Caroline, she was always known as Annie, but she's Ann now. Ann and Caroline, my daughters, the former Senate pages, and Ann was a clerk. All the help they've done, all the support they've given me over all these years. And of course, the force of nature, my great wife and advisor, Sue, everything she's done over all these years too. Thank you. The other people I think we all need to thank, and we don't do that very well, is our Senate family here. And that includes people who answer the phone. It includes all the pages, past and present, all the clerks, all the good clerks they've had over all the years, including Bobby, the sergeant of arms and the doorkeepers, everyone who's been here all these years who's done that, and our hardworking staff that makes us look a lot better than we really are. The caucus staff on both caucus staff. Back in the day when I was appropriations chair, Teresa Keogh was my Democratic staffer, and she was sick one day, so Carol Ann Jensen, the Republican staffer, served as my staffer that day in appropriations. So that's kind of the way things, hopefully, will continue to work in the Iowa Senate. Thank all those people. We want to thank Randy, also the hardest working guy in state government, and Mark. And of course, LSA, all the work they do. Once again, they make us look a lot better than we really are. And those people outside in the lobby, the third house. It's amazing, people who haven't been in the legislature have no idea what the lobby does for us and how they can be helpful and very useful. And even that place across the way, across the rotunda, what's that called, the Iowa House? They do a fine job too, and even downstairs. All the people who are downstairs and that we deal with. So I think that we should thank those people every day. I'm always amazed that every day I've been in the Iowa legislature, and it's 32 years, by the way, been in the Iowa legislature, that everyone's here to help you. From the first day I came here till today, everyone's here on the staff and around here always wanted to help you and make certain that you do well and the Iowa Senate does well. So I really appreciate that. I learned a couple things from long-time, actually these were lobbyists, but two principles I learned from lobbyists early on. I tried to adopt those, and I know Senator Danielson mentioned this. One of them is that you can probably get most things passed here as long as you don't care who gets credit for it. And that served me well as appropriations chair, and it should serve everyone well around here. Second one is we deal in raging incrementalism. That's what the legislature is set up to do, that we just move forward and just keep moving forward. Need to do that. So those two principles have been very well and served me well the last few years. The other thing, I was just trying to think of all these years, what are the things that, the Iowa Senate, when is the Iowa Senate at its best? And I think the Iowa Senate is at its best when we set aside our personal agendas and we work at problem solving. Now that's really difficult because everyone has an agenda. But when we set aside our own agendas and work at problem solving, we get a lot of things done. That was evidenced by the work we did in iJobs during the flood and a number of other situations we're talking about. I think the Iowa Senate also does its best when we stand for those people who have no voice. There's a number of people out there who have no voice in state government, and that's why we're here. And we need to serve those people. So I think we do our best work when we serve those who have no voice. And lastly, people ask after 32 years, why are you still coming back there? Why are you still doing that? And I think that every day in the Iowa House and in the Iowa Senate, I've done at least one thing and one reason to be proud of being a public servant in Iowa. And that's happened every day since I've been here for 32 years and will continue to happen. That we're here as public servants and we can be proud of that. And I will miss all that dearly. And one other thing I will miss all of you. Thank you.